You with us. So California may have crossed a dangerous threshold in the coronavirus outbreak in the United States. The Centers for Disease Control says a patient in Sacramento could be the first U.S. case of what's called community spread. Now that means he or she had no relevant travel history or exposure to another known patient. The CDC is considering expanding airport screenings for the virus. Currently, the U.S. is checking only passengers flying in from China. At Los Angeles International Airport, cleaning crews are stepping up their efforts to disinfect restrooms and other public places. And they've installed more than 100 additional hand sanitizing stations.
We're disinfecting LAX every hour. We're making sure that those points of entry and those places where we could see somebody come in and create a vector are as secure as we can possibly make them.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is trying to reassure Americans that the risk from coronavirus is very low, but he insists his administration is prepared. He's asked Vice President Mike Pence to lead the U.S. response. Apparently, that surprised Health Secretary Alex Azar, who says he's still chairman of the task force. Meanwhile, sources say the president is worried the falling stock market will hurt his chance for re-election.
We're very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level. We were asking for $2.5 billion, and we think that's a lot. But the Democrats and I guess Senator Schumer wants us to have much more than that. And normally in life I'd say, we'll take it. We'll take it. If they want to give more, we'll do more. We're going to spend whatever's appropriate. Hopefully we're not going to have to spend so much because we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum.
Have you been presented any plans that would involve quarantining cities like we saw in China? And what would have to happen for you to take a step?
We do have plans of on a much larger scale, should we need that. We're working with states. We're working with virtually every state. And we do have plans on a larger scale if we need it. We don't think we're going to need it, but, you always have to be prepared. And, again, Congress is talking to us about funding, and we're getting far more than what we asked for. And I guess the best thing to do is take it. We'll take it.
So let's talk more about the administration's response to the coronavirus outbreak with Dan Diamond. He writes for Politico. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
So after initially saying the coronavirus was a problem that would soon go away, President Trump came out Wednesday evening to address fears of it spreading. And this is what he said when asked if he trusted his own instincts above the advice of his own experts. Let's listen.
They've said it could be worse, and I've said it could be worse too. I also think, no, I don't think it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable. I think that we're doing a really good job in terms of maintaining borders, in terms of letting people in terms of checking people.
So, Dan, is this a case of the president downplaying the risk of a coronavirus outbreak to try to preserve the economy?
Rosemary, I think that's exactly what is happening. President Trump is very concerned that the coronavirus is going to pose not just a risk to the public health of Americans, but the biggest risk to his reelection. My colleagues at Politico reported with me a few days ago on the Black Swan event. That's how Trump and his advisors are looking at the coronavirus as a potential unexpected but major disruption to the economy and a scary moment, not just around the world, but with an election looming and Trump campaigning on the economy as his strongest issue.
Right, and at Wednesday's CNN town hall, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg reacted to what President Trump said about a possible coronavirus outbreak in this country. Let's listen to that.
Number one, he fired the pandemic team 2 years ago. Number two, he's been defunding Centers for Disease Control, so we don't have the experts in place that we need. I hope he's right that the virus doesn't come here, that nobody gets sick. That would be a wonderful outcome. But the bottom line is we are not ready for this kind of thing. And the president is not a scientist, is a nice way to phrase it, doesn't seem to believe in science. We are as exposed to this kind of thing as we've ever been, probably more so.
So, Dan, is Bloomberg right? Is this country not ready for an outbreak like this?
Well, I think he's at least half right, Rosemary. The President Trump, has made a lot of cuts to the U.S. public health infrastructure. He has proposed cuts to the CDC. He has gotten rid of staff, as Mike Bloomberg correctly said, who dealt with pandemics. At the same time, there are still many staffers who have years of expertise working on this. And there has not been major spread in the United States yet. This might be the kind of issue where, in the moment, it seems like the United States is okay, but 3 weeks later, we will realize that we didn't have enough staffing, enough resources, enough surveillance to prevent a potential outbreak. And in my reporting, the idea that the president has made these cuts, and now we're, as one source told me, it's a pray and see moment to determine if the U.S. is going to pay for the cuts and decisions that have been made in the past couple of years.
Right, and also how concerned should we all be about Vice President Mike Pence being selected by the president to lead the charge against preparing for a possible coronavirus outbreak, given he has no medical background, and when he was Indiana's governor, he chose prayer over any action to fight an HIV outbreak?
So Vice President Pence, in some ways, is a very good person to lead a response effort because he has more authority than anyone in the federal government other than President Trump. And if Mike Pence wants something to be done a certain way, that will happen. He will be able to put the power of the government behind him. But you are correct. The critics of Mike Pence are right. When he was in charge of Indiana's public health system, there were many public health problems in Indiana that did not get fixed. The needle sharing problem that led to HIV, opioid epidemic. There were some positive public health steps, but many efforts that slid backwards. I'm not sure that a public health expert needs to lead this response, though. In 2014, Joe Biden's longtime advisor, a man named Ron Klain, was put in charge of the U.S. Ebola outbreak response. Ron Klain is a well-known political official. I've talked to him many times. He is not someone who had healthcare experience before going into that role. What you need in that role is someone who can just get things done, who can coordinate across the government and make tough decisions. Mike Pence may be able to do that. He may not be able to do that. I guess we have to wait and see.
I guess we will. Dan Diamond, thank you so much for talking with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Well, the virus has now spread from China to every continent except Antarctica. And on Wednesday, for the first time since the outbreak began, there were more new cases reported outside mainland China than inside. In South Korea, the number of infections has jumped to almost 1,600. Now the US and South Korea are postponing joint military exercises until further notice. So let's go live to Seoul with CNN's Paula Hancocks. She joined us now. Paula, as a sign of just how seriously South Korea is taking this outbreak, it is now cancelling these joint drills with the US. What more are you learning about that?
Well, Rosemary, it appeared as though it was the South Koreans who requested that these drills be postponed. We heard from US officials just 24 hours ago that they were trying to work out how they could be scaled back as opposed to not happen at all. But they have been postponed until further notice. It's really unclear when they will be carried out. But they have said that it's simply not possible to hold them at this point. When you consider that the USFK, the US forces here in Korea, have had their first confirmed case of novel coronavirus, a 23-year-old male who was on a military base in Daegu itself and was staying on a military base close by. And then when you look at the South Korean military, they have 20 confirmed cases across the board in the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force. So they're certainly concerned and trying to to contain this, if you consider the way that many soldiers will be living and staying. I mean, it's a conscript army here in South Korea. They will be living in barracks in very close quarters. So it is something that the Defense Ministry is really trying to crack down on very carefully. And it also comes at the same time that the US State Department has decided to increase its alert level for South Koreans. So it's gone up to level 3, which is the second highest level it can be, which is telling Americans that they should reconsider travel to South Korea at this point. Rosemary?
All right, Paula Hancocks bringing us the very latest there from Seoul. Many thanks to you. And Iran is quickly emerging as the epicenter of the outbreak in the Middle East. It now has 139 confirmed cases and at least 19 deaths. And there's growing concern about the risk of it spreading to neighboring countries. For more, CNN's Jemana Karaca joins me now from Istanbul in Turkey. So, Jemana, let's start with Iran. What more are you learning about those confirmed cases and deaths there? And why is the mortality rate in Iran so much higher than elsewhere? Do we know?
Well, Rosemary, that is the big question. You know, we don't really know what is going on in Iran, keeping in mind that this is a country where information is very tightly controlled. And that is one of the main concerns here. Now, as you mentioned, the issue of the mortality rate. You said we're looking at figures as of yesterday, 139 confirmed cases and then 19 deaths. If you look at the mortality rate from the virus at this point, it's anywhere between 13 to 15% in Iran over the past few days. That is significantly higher than any other country in the world, significantly higher than the global average that's anywhere between 1 to 2%. And the question is, why is that? And, you know, one possibility here, a strong possibility, is there's an underreporting of the number of confirmed cases in Iran. We just don't know why that is. Is it an issue with screening? You know, keeping in mind the healthcare in that country is really impacted by the sanctions, so it might impact the capabilities in the hospitals. Are people showing symptoms being tested? Are people going to hospitals? Or are we looking at a case here where the Iranian regime is basically trying to downplay the severity of the situation? And, you know, we've heard from officials there, including the president, Hassan Rouhani, yesterday, basically trying to reassure people, telling them that it's all under control. And then, you know, also slamming the U.S., saying that they are trying to create panic and fear amongst the population. So there's a lot of concern about how transparent the authorities are being there and how seriously they are taking this and tackling this issue. You know, they have put some measures in place, you know, disinfecting public transport, cleaning up mosques and other places. They've closed some schools and theaters in Tehran, and even announced the extraordinary measure, Rosemary, on Friday of suspending. They're not going to be having Friday prayers in cities where there's confirmed outbreak of the coronavirus. But the question is, are they doing enough? And that is the big concern, especially when you look at the epicenter of the outbreak. That is the city of Qom. This is the holy Shia city in Iran. It's religious capital, pretty much, where we're hearing that shrines there are still open to visitors. They have not been shut down. Officials there trying to project this image where the situation is normal and everything is under control. And also another concerning development is what we heard from the president yesterday, saying at this point they have not made a decision and they're not considering at this point quarantining any Iranian cities, Rosemary.
A real concern there, indeed. Jemana Karaca bringing us the latest from her vantage point there in Istanbul, Turkey. Many thanks.